Don't you just love the sound of that word? Just villainous. It's just like, I don't know, it's juicy. It just sounds bad, like bad things are coming. And that's what we're going to be discussing today on the Comic, Sci-Fi, and Fantasy Fans Fantastic Forum. I'm Sherin Nicole, your host, and I've got a panel of, actually my own Rogues Gallery over here, of people to discuss Rogues Galleries with. And we'll start off by introducing Billie Rae Bates. Hi,
Hello.
welcome, first timer.
Thank you.
And the indomitable Roberto Ortiz. That's right. And another newcomer, but a good friend of the panel, Dave Disspain, who is also a comic book creator.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, guys, Rogues Galleries. Let's talk about them hero by hero. Who are your favorites, Roberto?
Duh. Batman.
Batman's Rogue Gallery.
Basically, if you cannot basically mention a Rogues Gallery without thinking of Batman, because bar none, he has one of the best and most complete Rogues Galleries out there in comic books. It's the envy of any other character because it's so complete, it's so well rounded, it has so many different types of craziness in this Rogues Gallery. It's such a rich Rogues Gallery that
That's absolutely true.
it's incredible.
And even the most comical of Batman's Rogues Gallery is frightening.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm afraid of like the silliest member, like, Mad Hatter. It's scary, in its own right. So who is your favorite of Batman's Rogues?
Believe it or not, I like the Riddler a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but the whole concept of this person who has this compulsion to leave clues and cannot help himself, I always found that great. And also the presentation, the way the character was presented back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Frank, I don't remember his last name, was amazing. And he basically presented the character with this comic and intense lunacy that I always felt was completely in love with the character. The
Yeah, it's
whole
pretty
motive
cool.
and everything's great.
Billie Rae, give us your thoughts on Batman's Rogues Gallery.
Well, I definitely agree that this is a large collection of villains, and it's definitely a collection of villains that have had so much mainstream, widespread exposure over the years. I mean, think of all the people out there who could name off 5 or 6 Batman villains right off the top of their
Yeah.
heads.
Almost more so than most other characters.
Yeah, and they might not be able to do that with Spider-Man or
Superman.
Incredible Hulk
Yeah.
or so it's a very large collection. I love Catwoman. But I've always felt that, I know that there's a lot of fans of Talia al Ghul, and, she's had a strong bond to Batman, but I've always felt that Catwoman was Batman's soulmate.
Yeah.
And it's
they
interesting.
dance a
Meant to
beautiful
be
dance,
together.
don't
Yes,
they?
I love it. I love the
Yeah.
tension between them. And also Catwoman, I think she's kind of a swing vote. She
Yes,
could go
she
either
walks that
way.
line.
She walks on the light side sometimes too, as well
does.
as the dark
Yeah.
side.
Dave?
I think we'd be remiss if we don't talk about the Joker just for 30 seconds. Being a big comics guy and a big comics fan, I think Killing Joke is probably one of my all-time favorite comics, and it's
Absolutely.
as much a definitive Batman story as a definitive Joker story. And so I think that if characters are defined, good guys, heroes are defined by their bad guys.
Yeah.
The dynamic between the Batman and Joker probably has to be the quintessential example of that.
I'd go so far as to say that they are interdependent. It's almost as though you can't have Batman as we know him, the core Batman, without the Joker.
I'm reminded of the movie Unbreakable, specifically in terms of how it presents the concept of the hero and the villain. That basically there's this codependency, as you mentioned before.
Yes.
But it's not only that, it's this common thread between both characters that one complements each other. So it's kind of like the yin and the yang of each other.
Right.
The best relationships between the hero and the antagonist is basically how they mirror each other in a
How
negative
they
fashion.
interact.
I'll give you a
And-
perfect example,
Okay.
and it has nothing to do with superheroes.
Oh, that's
Di-
bad. I don't think we should do that.
But think of, for example, the original Die Hard movie.
Yes.
John McClane basically happens to be a working class stiff. Who is he fighting? He's fighting this European aristocratic person.
Elite, well-educated.
Well-educated. Basically the complete opposite of him.
Yeah.
Batman is the opposite, the Joker.
So give us another Rogues Gallery that you like.
I am always been fond of the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery, but I think what I find most interesting today is transitioning from a more Marvel mindset, which I sort of grew up with, to a more DC mindset, I think this whole Green Lantern thing has really taken off in an unexpected direction for me, with all the different colored lanterns, Sinestro.
Yeah, because when you think Green Lantern, you really focus on Sinestro. It's like the singular Green Lantern. Like, there might not even, I mean, is there a rogues gallery for Green
Well,
Lantern?
he brings an army behind him. It's like, it's
Yeah,
me.
exactly.
You and what army? Well, they're behind me. Thank you.
It's that, and it's all of these different. When they started introducing all the different colors, it was these, sort of minor characters that jumped to the forefront in a lot of ways, and it was almost like they manufactured a rogues gallery when there wasn't one.
That's interesting. Yeah, I could totally see that. Billie Rae, which rogues gallery do you want to highlight?
Well, I hate to go so mainstream again, but Superman, definitely.
Okay.
Superman has, again, like Batman, a big collection of villains that we've seen all over the place. We've seen them on TV and in the comics and in movies and everything, and everybody can name a bunch of Superman villains.
Really?
And yes.
Okay.
And only that, he has the best villain in comic books, period. In my opinion.
Yeah,
Lex
he's
Luthor.
got one up.
Lex
I can't
Luthor.
let you.
Oh.
Luthor is okay, but the bar none? Nah.
Oh, I would, yeah.
I'm not
Sorry,
drinking at that
it's-
bar.
Sorry.
Go.
Well, he's probably interesting because he doesn't have any superpowers.
Nope.
He doesn't have any supernatural
He's fighting
abilities.
a god, for crying out
He's
loud.
all brain power,
But
really.
I think that brain power is a supernatural ability. I really do. I think that when you get to an intellect like Luthor's, that's not normal.
But
You know,
Well,
this
his
is a
level
guy.
of obsessiveness, too, is
This is a guy who basically took it on himself. You have to admire this. This guy comes from the sky and is almost like a god on earth. I'm gonna take him. This is a guy who knows full well this god could squash him like a bug like that. And he's taking him 1-to-1. That's impressive.
Yeah. But who else is in Superman's rogues gallery?
Metallo, Parasite, Metallo, Parasite, Darkseid, of course.
Darkseid, yeah, we were saying that Darkseid, our producer, and says that Darkseid is a DC, big DC villain, but I would say he's really tied to Superman.
a lot
He's
of people identify
primarily
with
Superman,
Superman.
Yes.
I think.
And then there's
Yeah.
Doomsday.
I think my favorite Superman villain has to be General Zod.
Oh, I
Oh, yeah.
forgot about Zod.
I just find him
Now
fascinating.
those are flip sides.
Yeah,
Those
exactly.
are mirror images there. Yeah. I mean, I can't forget about Terrence Stamp in the movie, and the president's on his knees and he says, "Oh God," and he goes, "No, Zod."
Zod. Exactly.
And that's basically one of those things where you see a performer taking the character and making the character into something else, and guess what? It's stuck. That's
It's
the
stuck.
definitive version.
Yes, it did.
Right.
It as many people take issue with Jack Nicholson's Joker, which I'm going backwards, but just talking about these rogues that stick, these villains that we love to hate that we couldn't do without. If they die, we're done. And Luthor's one of them. Zod, because of how he sticks in the memory from the movies, is another one. Joker, he can't die.
How
right?
about Clancy Brown when he was playing Lex Luthor on the animated
Oh,
series?
it's
Nice.
genius. It is the quintessential Luthor. No one can touch that Luthor. Nobody. I don't think.
When I read comic books and I read him Lex Luthor, the voice I hear,
That's the voice.
Clancy Brown.
And that's
It's
the
like-
face that I see. There's no Gene Hackman. There's no Kevin Spacey. What is it, thinking about it, let's just, because we're having a DC segment, does Wonder Woman have a rogues gallery?
Angleman.
Cheetah.
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 That's
the
the
only
only
one I've
one,
Silver
that comes
Banshee.
to mind because, when you think about the TV show,
Ares,
which really
maybe?
popularized Wonder Woman, the Linda Carter TV
Yeah.
show
Sure.
from the 70s, you didn't see these villains. You saw the Nazis in the first season, then in the
Right.
second and third season, you saw just bad guys, I guess, or
Random.
things happening because it was more of a spy drama. She was an agent out in the field, the
That's true.
IADC
And actually,
agent.
I'm glad you guys are bringing Wonder Woman up because she has suffered as a character because of that.
Absolutely. Which goes back to what I really want to get more into in the second segment is the way that villains define the hero.
Yeah.
Right.
Because Wonder Woman does suffer because Cheetah's her villain. I mean, come on, dude. I mean, how can you be a great villain, a great hero, when your worst test is Cheetah?
And think about this. So Batman basically has more empowered villains in terms of females than Wonder Woman.
Then Wonder Woman does. And
You are right.
we are
Powerful
going to
female.
keep
Yes.
that thought because there's some feminism happening up in this piece. And we're going to continue to think about that while you go and check out some cool segments. So see you in a few.
here at the Baltimore Comic Convention talking to comics legend Jim Starlin. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Starlin.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Now, before we got on camera, you were talking a little bit about the character Thanos, whom you were responsible for, and this is one of the main villains in the Marvel Universe. Would you tell us a little bit about the creation of Thanos?
Well, Thanos started off while I was in junior college after I got out of the service. I had a psych class. The Freudian concept of Thanos and Eros came up. Started to do some sketches to embody it. Eventually came to Marvel. Got a job doing an Iron Man issue. Dusted off Thanos and decided to insert him in. At the time, he was a smaller character who had sort of a mechanized chair he sat on. A lot of folks think that Darkseid is sort of a ripoff, or Thanos is sort of a ripoff of Darkseid, but in truth, he originally started off to be a ripoff of Metron from the same series. But when I put him in, Roy Thomas, who was the editor at the time, said, well, bulk him up a little bit. And so I did, and as time went on, Thanos bulked up as Darkseid started bulking up. And they both became about the same size. And so everybody tends to think of them as the same kind of character.
You know, another character whom had a tremendous influence on me just through your work was Captain Marvel. Could you tell us a little bit about Captain Marvel and you know, the various things you did on that book?
Captain Marvel was a very unsuccessful science fiction character that Marvel had, and was on the verge of cancellation again, and I had just been fired off Iron Man, so Roy Thomas said, hey, I got this other book. It may not last an issue, but you might as well start drawing it, and we'll keep you busy with that in the meantime. And so I did, and they found the sales went up a little bit, and it lasted, and eventually it became a fairly good selling book for him before I left it. I had fun with him. He was a character who was a warrior, and I had just come out of the service myself and wanted to go in a different direction with it, and there was enough other warriors out there already in the comics. And so I thought I'd change him, going into more of a spiritual bent, taking a different path. The cosmic awareness came out of somewhere, I have no idea, but you know, it was basically all just getting in contact with yourself, and that's sort of how he changed around to become what he was.
Now, I've always thought that you were a phenomenal artist, but I've seen more of your writing. I mean, you're a phenomenal writer as well, but I've been seeing a lot more of your writing lately as opposed to your art.
Well, I've always thought of myself chiefly as a storyteller. The art and the writing both are just to augment the story. I'd be just as happy sitting around an old campfire, and rather than going out and hunting the mastodons, I'd sit around and tell them some other stories so I didn't have to do that sort of thing. But basically, I'm doing more writing just because drawing is hard. My style is, quite frankly, becoming dated as time goes on. I mean, I don't look like anything like at Marvel or DC anymore. What's coming out of there? So, you know, I mean, it is pop culture what we're doing here, and things change. And I enjoy writing. I just finished another novel, which I have down at Agents right now, called Last Goods Boys. I may do more of that. I do have Breed 3 coming out next summer, so I'm not giving up drawing. I'm drawing that. But, you know, it's basically storytelling, and whatever works to make it work is what I do.
I think your art is fabulous. I don't feel it's dated at all, and I think that your unique style is part of what makes comics great. You know, your style I always thought was very clean, very unique, and very crisp, and I love what you do personally.
Yeah, but everything goes in and out of vogue. And, you know, whether you like it or not, you know, time goes on, and so you have to accept the fact that certain things look at this way at a certain time, and, you know, I mean, look at fashion, look at television, look at movies. Everything is creatures of its time, whether it's pop art or fine art. Things change, and, you know, what I did at this time and what even my own art, I can see the difference between my Captain Marvel stuff and the stuff I'm doing on Breed now. You know, different time, different second.
Well, there's certainly no denying that you have made an indelible imprint on comics. Your character Thanos. This is, you know, one of the main villains in the Marvel Universe. I mean, how does it feel to have been one of the artists and writers who has left such an imprint on the industry?
How does it feel being me? It doesn't, I can't answer that question. Basically, it's like I don't have as much to do with comic books as I used to. My life has more to do with spending time on the river. And, whether Thanos, I did what I did with Thanos, what happens with him now is up to whoever comes after me, so that's the best answer I can give you on that one.
We'd like to take a moment to pay respects to some dear friends who left us recently. Some of their faces might not be familiar, but each of these individuals made an impact on the world of comics, science fiction or fantasy, or in some cases, all three. So this segment might be more appropriately titled Gone But Never Forgotten. In any case, we here at Fantastic Forum want to honor and remember them.
Back discussing the villains, and I'm not going to do too much but just dive back in. You guys, first segment we really just stuck with DC, so I think it'd be nice to get into Marvel, but then maybe Dark Horse or Vertigo or Top Cow. Maybe we could wing out.
We touched on it really briefly earlier, but I think Spider-Man and how he has such a huge, vast array of characters that surround him as being a bad guy. I mean,
but we were saying in the break that it was primarily animal based.
Exactly.
I got Venom's my favorite. I think as a graphic artist, graphically, Venom is so beautiful. Graphically, that gaping maw. I love
for
it.
me personally, I always found Venom as just sort of a bad clone.
Oh.
I never really got into Venom in the sense that a lot of other people did. A lot of other people took him as like, this is going to be the next big thing for Spider-Man. And I always thought, this is just sort of a cheap knockoff to me. So your love for Venom is very interesting to me because I don't share it at all. Yeah, so but I think, I off the top of my head, I can't think of any real Spider-Man villain that comes to mind. And I guess I'm coming up with
the best known are Doc Ock and Green Goblin, right? Maybe Billie Rae can help us out.
I was just thinking of the X-Men.
Okay.
Because you have all of the heroes and then you have the villains, and the common thread is the idea of human mutation.
Yes.
Mutation of human beings that kind of binds them all together. I think of Magneto, the powerful Magneto. His power rivals Charles Xavier's.
But
and his ability to galvanize the mutants,
Yes, it's all about factions too.
It's almost like street gangs.
And kind of wavering between that good and evil we were talking about before, a swing vote type of thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
I kind of have a problem with the concept of Rogues Gallery in X-Men, but before I go there, Fantastic Four has a fantastic Rogues Gallery.
Yeah, you gotta love Dr. Doom. First and foremost, you love Doom.
The problem I have with the X-Men specifically is that it's almost like street gangs picking fight with each other, because with the Fantastic Four, Superman, all of them, there seems to be almost this moral core about it. The X-Men is basically it's true, we're fighting for humanity, blah, 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 blah. But it almost feels like street gangs in terms of let's mark
But
territory.
it still
let's
works
basically-
as a rogues gallery because, in much the way that we were talking about, Magneto does define Xavier, and Xavier does define Magneto. They really do.
But the thing is that you can actually, if I mention Lex Luthor, you get the motivation immediately. If I mention Magneto, fine, you get the motivation immediately. But Mr. Sinister.
Yeah.
But,
Well, Apocalypse, though.
Apocalypse. But the thing is that it almost feels like a clone of the same character. Apocalypse, Mr. Sinister, Legion.
What?
It's interest-
You might just catch a hammer. What are you saying to me? Does anybody want to disagree with this man? Please, please.
I think what I understand what he's trying to say, that these are sort of nearly omniscient,
Yeah.
super powerful characters that always seem to tackle it. But when you have a heroes gallery like the X-Men do, at one point literally in the hundreds of characters,
Right.
you have to have planet-cracking villains to be able to
has to
to,
have
to
big
rival them.
scale,
They have to have
right.
something, where if I got 20 guys attacking you, you have to be
Yeah.
able to fend all of that off. I understand his point, and I agree with it to a certain extent, but I also feel like Mr. Sinister brings something that is very interesting, and he's the sort of the genetic manipulation
Yeah.
that he's doing, and I
There's
love
the
the fact.
scientist element.
Right. I love the fact that the only thing that he seems to be vulnerable to is Cyclops' eye beam. There's just something sort of wacky and wild and fun about that. So it's very interesting to me that it's mixed with the big street gang, multiple groups of picking fights with each other, but it's also got these sort of sprinkled in individuals,
Point
and I think that makes it interesting too.
Is it true that the best villains really do define these heroes?
Yeah.
That they really do
Absolutely.
inform who they are?
Yeah.
So give me some thoughts. Give me some examples, Billie Rae.
Go ahead.
Dave, if you go.
I was just saying the first thing that sprung to mind when you talked about that is we were talking about Batman and the Joker earlier. It's these two characters are so intertwined that it's hard to define one without the other.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways you sort of they have to be sort of at the top of the list. But I think there's, in talking about the X-Men, who would they be without some of their,
Right.
you know,
The Fantastic Four without Doom. I mean, seriously,
Right,
think
exactly.
about that for a minute. What I guess challenge would be big enough to make them true heroes without Doom?
Actually, the thing is that the fight between the Fantastic Four and Doom is more about Reed Richards fighting who is the biggest head between him and Doctor Doom.
It's like a mental chess match
Exactly.
between the
It's
two of
like who can be the biggest genius here. And one controls a country, one has a ton of money. Let's see, basically. And a beautiful wife. So
Billie Rae.
Well, we've seen heroes battle villains who aren't really big on the character and the costume and everything, and maybe they're just bad guys. Like, for instance, recently I've been watching the Super Friends episodes from 1973, the first
Awesome.
season.
Yeah.
And what really struck me is there are no hero, rogues gallery villains in that. There's no big name villains. It's just some bad guys who get, some professor who gets a bad idea and he tries to take over the world. And there's very much an ecological theme. So it's
Yes,
kind
there
of
was.
fighting against injustices, fighting against the destruction of the earth in other ways, not by a villain, but by some other threat that's
Right.
more natural, I
Which
guess.
does work, but I think it works better for kids than it does for us.
Well, I was
But-
going to say a lot of
yeah.
that was influenced by the broadcast standards at the time. They couldn't show a whole lot of fighting or violence. It had to be
Wow.
more of thinking their way through problems.
You know what's interesting is I just thought about the television series Heroes, right?
Yeah.
And we all know it fell apart after season 1.
Yep.
But one of the reasons that it may have fallen apart is two things. Sylar, right? Sylar?
Sylar.
Stopped developing as a character. He ceased to develop, and therefore that challenge was gone. And then horn-rimmed glasses became our friend. And so we lost two of our key villains in that series Heroes, and it fell apart. What do you think?
It's a very good point. I started to watch season 2, and it never ever felt the same, and it never ever felt like it was fresh and different and exciting anymore.
agreed.
The whole I was totally on board with season 1. Save the cheerleader, save the world. It was genius. But and then Sylar, and we're talking about defining characters. Sylar defined those people. They were struggling with, who am I after these? These emergence of these powers. What am I doing? What can I do with them? And it was all, he defined where they were going in the season. He defined what they were all about. And then without that, there was nothing.
They fell apart. And without the kind of ominous presence of horn-rimmed glasses, which that's what we knew him as season 1, and then he kind of became more to us, but he was too friendly then. So that was gone. And
it seems that basically the creator of the show should have seated his ass down. Sorry, and basically think through what am I trying to say here?
Right.
Okay.
The cool thing of why Batman, Superman are iconic in a way is that they tell us something about the human condition one way or another. All these characters, and Sylar was a fantastic character because it was basically this character who was just there to accumulate power. Period.
Right.
That's it.
But he was a danger to all of them
and
because
then
of it.
they threw nonsense. He has a mental health. No, this is a guy who basically is there to accumulate power.
So let's see what different ways he can do that.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. Now, what about this guy back here?
Optimus Prime basically is which version?
Megatron. I'm talking about Megatron.
Well, which version of Optimus Prime? The movie version is completely different from the cartoon version.
Let's go with the core Optimus Prime. We're going to put all of Optimus Prime in a blender and take the essential Optimus Prime.
Okay, they picked their
which means we're taking the essential Megatron. Do these guys define each other?
Yes.
Why?
Easy. Optimus Prime basically is there to basically protect. Megatron is the opposite. He's basically to acquire, to control. And he basically believes in the concept, this is the only thing the movie got right, the only thing, is that he is looking out for his race, period. Prime basically believes that all life is essential, even if our race is going to go extinct. That's the core difference between the two characters.
Well, there you go. I think what Roberto just said pretty much sums up heroes and their rogues galleries all together. I mean, I can't say it any better, and you know how much I like to talk. So, we're going to say goodbye. Hope you enjoyed this episode, Rogues Gallery episode, Say Villainy With Me. And shoot us an email. Let us know what you thought about the show, and we will see you soon.